Hello, this is the presentation on the Clanaboy ONeills and their DNA connections. And I'm Dwayne O'Neill. I'm a co-administrator of the Family Tree DNA O'Neill project. And this information here is current as of June of 2021, and any DNA results after that would be updated. The purpose of the presentation, I'd like to share some of the insights with my fellow Clandeboye members. I'd like to also provide an overview of the Clandeboye Clan and summarize the O'Neill variety, sometimes called the Royal O'Neills, DNA landscape. And then following up be with detailing the Clandeboye DNA Haplogroup BY3292 and meshing the DNA tree to traditional Clanaboy genealogy. I'd like to summarize where we are and the future of O'Neill DNA discoveries. The Clandeboys are a branch of the Royal O'Neills, and it is Hugh the Yellow-Haired, who died in 1283 as the ancestor. Clandeboys, there's various versions of the spelling of the name, and it's an anglicized form of Clanaboy. Clandeboys had their seats of power, included Endunduff or Shane's Castle, and Castlereagh castles near Belfast. The Clandeboy power came to an end in the early 1600s when Con O'Neill signed away 2/3 of his land. At the height in the mid-1500s, Clanaboy covered the southern portion of County Antrim and County Derry and the northern portion of County Down in Northern Ireland. This here territory, is indicated, Clanaboys indicated in the pink in this here diagram. And it was bounded by the O'Kanes on the north side, and on the west side would be the Great O'Neills or the Tyrone O'Neills, and below that would be the O'Neills of the Fuse. And this here is really surrounded a good portion of Lake Nell. For reference material for the Clanaboys, Martin Mellon has done a good presentation called The Rise of the Clanaboys. And Martin Ireland, in a series of Facebook postings since over the past couple of years, has done a description of the history of the Clanaboys. There's an article in History Ireland called Creating Facts on the Ground, the Destruction of the Clanaboy. And from a traditional genealogy point of view, John O'Hart in the Princes of Clanaboy Irish Pedigrees gives the lineage of the main line of the Clanaboy. And then Desmond O'Neill, the father of Sean O'Neill, who is the administrator of the O'Neill project, has a CD called The Ancient and Royal Family O'Neill, which has the details of almost all of the lines of the O'Neill, including the Clanaboys. The Family Tree DNA O'Neill project has almost 1,000 members right now, and kits have been completed for autosomal, Y-DNA, and mitochondria testing by members of the project. We're specifically interested in Y-DNA, and there's 3 different tests for that, including STRs, SNPs, and Big Y testing. STR stands for short tandem repeat polymorphisms. SNP stands for signal nucleoid polymorphisms. And the Big Y testing includes SNPs, and private variants, which are DNA variants that don't match anyone else at that point in time. A haplogroup describes the terminal SNP that is shared with one or more other kits. And so when one shares a variant with another kit, then that would be named and then can be used as a haplogroup. The ONeil project has two main Y-DNA ONeil groupings, one being ours, ONeil variety, and a second one, the UNeil. And it also has several what I classify as old Irish groups. And they are smaller groups and are part of the two main groups. When one looks at the ONeil project, the traditional grouping is by STRs. And the ONeil variety would be kits that are under Z1513. And under Z1513, okay, are, as I mentioned, for the ONeil variety, are two main subgroups. The one on the indicated on the right here would be groups 1, B2, 3, and 4. And they would all be positive for Z1513, but negative for BY3292. The kits indicated on the left here are group 1B1 and 1B1A and B. And again, they would be positive for Z1513 and also positive for BY3292. In the ONeil project, these groupings are somewhat limited in that they're ordered within the groups by just the STR numbers, values. And so there isn't any real interrelationship between the kits as indicated on these diagrams. A better structure is through the haplogroup, and where each kit is described by the terminal SNP. And under Z1513, there are 4 branches. 2 of these branches have only 2 kits each, being BY31270 and BY57572. And one of the main branches for the Tyrone McShane fuse are associated with the branch FT32273. And they have a total of about 21 kits. The 4th branch is the one that we're most interested in, is associated with Clanaboys and BY3292. And it has, at this moment, 23 kits. For the Clanaboy kits, for the geographic locations, okay, of those 23 kits, there's 9 of the kits have indicated their earliest known ancestor geographic location as being in Ulster, and 9 only go back to the United States, 4 Scottish, 1 New Zealand, and 5 kits with an unknown location. Of the 9 kits that are from Ulster, they're indicated on this diagram, and 5 of them are aligned with the traditional Clanaboy territory. 2 are located on the border between the traditional Clanaboy and Tyrone ONeil geographic location. And then the two others are further down towards the fuse area. So this gives us an indication that the BY32's further information is associated with the Clanaboys. This here diagram gives us further detail of the haplogroup structure below the 2 main branches. And so on the left-hand side is the FT32273 branch associated with the Tyrone, McShane, and fuse. And it gives an indication here of the branches and sub-branches below that. And indicated on the bottom are that there are 2 kits that have known genealogy, and the one on the very bottom left, has as an ancestor Shane the Proud, and then further up to Egan O'Neill, who died in 1456. There's a second branch with a known O'Neill genealogy associated with the fuse. And then it goes up again through Owen O'Neill in 1456. On the right-hand side of this diagram is the BY3292 branch. And underneath it, it has 4 branches, one of them being FGC 37026 with 3 kits. Another one being FT 218632 with 9 kits. Third one being FGC 49744 with 10 kits. And then a 4th branch with just 1 kit that doesn't have any matching at this point in time. But when its private variants show up with another kit in the future, would be a name branch. Within the BY3292, there is 1 kit that has a known genealogy coming up through Arthur O'Neill of Nelsbrook, who's the ancestors of the O'Neills of Breakheart, which is near Randallstown. And then it comes up through the line of Endencarrick Castle. This here slide is further details under the BY3292 clade. And as we indicate with the 4 main branches, and then the indication of the sub-branching below that. And each SNP branch here represents another son, grandson, or great-grandson line on the male line. And each new SNP variant typically forms on average every 80 years. So as an example, the block of SNPs on the left-hand side for BY31268 of a block of 5 SNPs, they would have been formed over a time period of about 320 years. And so that can be used for aging, for age estimates. So I'll just leave this here for a few seconds. And so people that are members of the BY3292 clade can get a sense of where they fit on this diagram. You know, some examples of your haplogroup would be BY31266. You'd be under the FT 218632 branch. And if your haplogroup, as an example, was BY 191958, you'd be under the 3rd branch, FGC 49744. And so this is the outline as of now in June of 2021. As new people get tested for Big Y, then this year will be updated and there'll be more granularity over time. Here's another simplified form of BY3292. So on the left-hand side here, BY3292 actually is a block of 5 SNPs. And the order of these SNPs is unknown at this time, and they could have been formed in any particular order. And again, this is a block of 5 SNPs. So we would have expected that typically they would have been formed over a 320 years time frame. And so with the Clanaboy line forming around 1180 AD, so with the 320 years, so the end of this block would have been finished around 1500 AD. And then over on the right-hand side, below this block of BY 3292, is the 3 branches. Here's a diagram of the Clanaboy O'Neill pedigree. And for the, again, the same time period of 1230 to 1512 AD. And starting with the overall ancestor of all the O'Neill variety, coming down to Nial Mor, who died around 1512. And if we continue on there, Nial Mor had 5 sons, as indicated on this diagram here. And then his grandson also then had 2 sons, and great-grandson another two sons. And so, as indicated, the known Clanaboy lineage for one of the kits follows the line on the left-hand side here. Then if we overlap the Clanaboy pedigree for 1230 to 1512 AD with the haplogroups, the BY 3292 block would then have been formed over this time period by these individuals. And as I mentioned before, they could have been formed in any order, and the time frame is an estimate. So as an example, the BY 3292 could have been formed around 1230 or so. And then the other SNPs, but it could have been any other of the 4 SNPs could have been formed there. And then again, after about an 80-year period, a second SNP formed. And then again, through that whole time period. So it would end up with Nial Mor, could have been the, when on his birth, as an example, one of those SNPs in that block could have been formed. And I'm just saying, for instance, it could have been FT 64788, but it could have been any other one. Then as we continue on here from Nial Mor, if it was FT 64788, then the other SNPs then get overlaid. And for the known line on the left-hand side here, FGC 37026 would have been the next one formed, and it could have been by that individual. And then this block of 4 SNPs would have been formed at a later date. That leaves us with the question about the other 2 branches, being FT 218632 and FGC 49744. And they would have been formed by one of the other sons of the line on the left-hand side. But we don't have any information to really tie either of these 2 branches to any one individual. And so as an example, FT 218632 could have been a branch associated with the son Hugh, who died in 1524. For the son Brian Ballock with the O'Neills of Lisbon, I wouldn't expect that any of these lines are associated with that, because there are living descendants of that line, and to our knowledge, none of them have been DNA tested. The other branch, FGC 49744, likewise, there's no known descendants associated with that branch. So it could have been any one of those sons as well, or could have been a son earlier, as indicated on this diagram. And so from an overview point of view, here's a hypothesis of overlaying the SNPs and haplogroups onto the known Clanaboy O'Neill pedigree line. And until we get new kits coming in with a known pedigree, we won't know for sure how the other branches or any new branches will be lined up. I have a little bit of information. As I mentioned, there was 5 sons of Nial Mor who died in 1512. And all 5 of these sons were actually kings of Clanaboy over the 1512 to 1556 time period. And one of the sons, Hugh, he was his area was near Bellamina, and there's a report that he had no living male heirs. So it's unlikely that one of the 2 DNA branches is associated with Hugh. We talked about the ONeills of Lisbon. A 3rd son, okay, is associated with the ONeills of Edinburgh or Shane's Castle. And so that is our known line. There's a 4th son, and he's also reported as having no living male heirs. But the 5th son is quite interesting. He was the last lord of Clanaboy, and he's reported to have 8 tall sons. And so it's a possibility that both of the 2 DNA branches could be associated with one of 2 different sons of this individual. So this individual is another step down in the pedigree, and his traditional territory was on the southeast side of Loch Ness. He had castles in Lisburn and in Portmore. And you might recall that 2 of the kits associated with BY 3292 had their earliest known ancestor from quite close to this area. So this is another possibility of one of the branches being connected, the DNA branches being connected to this individual. And to summarize, for the goals within the next year, I'd like to confirm the identity of the Clanaboy seps that are associated with BY 3292 sub-branches. I'd like to encourage all the O'Neill variety kits that have tested to 37 or 67 values to upgrade to either 111 or to Big Y itself. We're aiming to close the gap for the O'Neill kits that have hit the traditional Irish research early 1800s brick wall. And also we'd like to identify the several Z1513 sub-branches, which would be associated with 1 or more of the Tyrone, Fuse, McShane's, or Treemore lines. An overall summary, the O'Neill project is just one example of many surname projects that have made significant advances through broad-based STR and Big Y testing. We're now very close to relating identified haplogroups to specific O'Neill seps. I'd like to make a sincere thanks to all the kits, especially those that have completed Big Y upgrades. Feel that we are in the golden age of genealogy research through a broad range of genetic genealogy tools. So thank you. Appreciate you being part of this presentation.